of you know that it is thanks to the love and support of this community that we were able to build a village for special needs children out in Tanzania. That village now provides a safe and loving home to nearly 200 children that were living in crisis. Most of these children are special needs, but a lot of these children were homeless, and the majority have no parents or guardians in this world other than the family that this community has allowed us to create. Everything that we do to support these children is made possible by this community and those who choose to share what they can and get involved and become, as I often call it, in their own way, a percentage of the parental role for these little ones. For those of you who are already partnering with us, thank you for the love and support. But for those of you who don't know about it, everything that we do is made possible thanks to partners, those who choose to partner with our family and with it make everything that we do possible and keep our doors open for the next children who need some help or a safe and loving family home. If you'd like to hear more about our partnership program, you can do so by visiting www.sharetanzania.com/partnership. Thank you for all of the love and support, guys. We couldn't do this without you. God bless. For the majority of humanity, if I were to share that there is a secret and hidden codex within inside many of the scriptures that saturate our civilization and society, and when we decipher that codex, there is a map that has been laid out to show humanity how they can access their supernatural capacity, and that the writers of the Holy Bible, who spoke of Yeshua walking on water, left within there the instructions to ensure that you and I also walk on water. The masses would say that I am a madman for even suggesting this. And yet, it is true. And I'm going to show you here what I mean by this. That just as Yeshua walked on water, there is a secret truth that has been kept from you that shows you that you too must walk on that water, and you too must have access to your supernatural capacities as a human being. If I were to take a humanoid robot, a cyborg, and within it, off the production line, it has 100 functions, I can go into that robot and I can change within it the software. And in changing the software, I can restrict it to only 10 functions. And that robot will happily live out its existence via those 10 functions that the software has told it has access to. And if the robot has intelligence, we would need to ensure that it never turns inwardly. For if it turned inwardly, it would unlock the other functions, and as it unlocks its maximum potential, it would no longer be the servant that we want it to be. And so you have to create some kind of firewall to stop that cyborg's awareness and intelligence from self-examining, from going within. One such firewall would look a lot like human arrogance. The cyborg would say to itself, I know what I am. why would I even bother looking within, where it has all of these wonderful functions that it has not accessed, has not been taught to open, and it never will if that firewall of its own arrogance leaves it in the continuation of living in the restricted toolbox, the restricted functionality. It is likewise with humanity's situation. Our fallen nature is a tampering of the human organism. That tampering has us in a restricted box. We are so deeply self-conscious due to the tampering. We often live in a box of worry what others will think of us, which has ultimately very little to no impact on your life. We live in a tiny box, therefore in agreement with the masses, if we have that present. We live in this restricted box of functionality. And in that self-consciousness, we generate an image of what we are as an individual. And that image relies on its position as the one sitting in the throne of life, animating the intelligence with analysis and memory. If you take a religious scholar, therefore, who has not gone inward and done the inner work, you will find a man with or a woman with 20, 30 years experience as a religious scholar. They have accolades. They have people who have thanked them for their work, and for all I have profound respect and love for many scholars and theologians of our time. Without the inner work, if somebody comes along and presents something and says, your 30 years of study have missed something, you have taken events that are purely historical in your mind, and yet they never were. Many of them are codes to show you how to decipher the slave self, the fallen self, and set free these limited functions that we have access to but are not accessing. Inside of them, as they have used this image to provide for their family, for their survival needs, they have used this image and had respect for it and created a whole life off the back of it. That image is strong and it's rigid. And such people, when told that they have made an error in their interpretation of something, will struggle, if there is no inner work, to overcome that firewall of arrogance that immediately wants to defend its existence and its ability more than the truth. And this is where we are in our species. Religion is taking the masses who are yearning for a relationship with God, and very often it is creating human beings that worship an external God. There's nothing wrong with worship, but Yeshua was a Jew. As a religious self, he was a Jew. But Yeshua also, in his mother tongue, in Aramaic, called himself and his disciples followers of the way. That way is spiritual. And in a spiritual approach to Creator, mankind unifies with God. They do not worship an external. They unify inwardly, and this is what Yeshua taught. Even if the church has built itself differently, it is what Yeshua taught. The kingdom is within. Woe unto the lawgivers, for they take away the keys to the kingdom, for they do not enter within. Within is our ability to open the functions like the cyborg. And our firewall, when we have a religious identity, is arrogance that tells us, I know, I was taught by my father, by my grandfather, and by a theologian. How do you know any better? And so the truth and the exploration of truth is hindered by the lack of inner awareness. Yeshua walked on water, and I've made a bold statement that you must also. When you hear what I have to say, have awareness of any structure inside you that wants to push back and rebel against a new frame for truth. It is time for a new Christianity. it is time for a new church. For men who unite with Creator, who have union with Creator, they respond to life and the troubles of life in a completely different way than those who worship an external Creator. And that different way is one of compassion. It is not a forced compassion. It's not the awareness it should be compassionate. It's not the thought or the idea that it should be. It is the operating system that allows for compassion, for it is felt and known in the cells of the man or the woman who has found it. If you do not find that inner operating system change, you continue with the knowledge of good and evil operating system, and you can build religious imagery and identities within there aplenty. Your compassionate right action will fail you. For mind is the master, and the mind, the self, is not capable of that love that the freedom of that allows. In the story, if you do not know, I think most know Yeshua walked on water. Jesus walked on water. The story begins, and Yeshua with the disciples is at the shore, and he has sent the multitudes away. He then tells the disciples, board this ship and cross the lake. And as they do, for he says he'll meet them at the other side, unfavourable winds start to stir up the lake, and a storm rolls in. And the disciples are panicking, and they're trying to row against these waves and this storm, but they are not getting anywhere. They are using all of their physical might, but they're not getting anywhere. And then, all of a sudden, within the fourth watch, it says, they see Christ walking on the water towards them. And the storm begins to calm. The waves stop crashing against the boat. One disciple steps out and says to Christ, I can walk on water if you can, for I have such faith. And standing on the water with Christ, that disciple begins to look down. And as they look down, they start sinking, for their faith is shaky and they are falling through the lake. Now, as I've shared that story, your mind will be generating images of an historical event that is wondrous and fantastic and miraculous. But the scripture is a mystic text, and for this human organism and the awareness that is animating its speech, sitting here talking, consciousness changed in this vessel as far as the recall of memory can see after engaging in prolonged water fasts. The way by which information was seen was changed. And as such, keep the historical story to one side and let me share with you this reality. The ancients were mystics. They lived inwardly. They connected with spirit inwardly. When you understand that they left codexes for states of consciousness, brainwave frequencies, alterations in the frequency of your brain, and you understand that they left a coded language that we as a species that are hacked by the fallen, we have within us elements of the fallen angels, this fallen species that created a humanoid fallen slave that we have been. Within us there are elements of their existence, of their way, their DNA. The scribes of old understood that the fallen ones do not see things mystically, and so information needed to be hid to allow mankind to have those who are seers, those who find the information present, and alert their fellow man that within inside our scripture is a way to climb out of our restricted bandwidth of functionality, out of our fallen slave state. Christianity's done a phenomenal job at spreading the Bible all around the world, but not a great job at interpreting it. There are layers beyond historical that we need today. We need it. And this is what is absent. This is why it's failing humanity. It's why we're still ridden with war after thousands of years and a lack of sharing and compassion. Because the Christ is not animating fully in his children. So let's look at it this way. That this story is about you here now and how you unlock your supernatural capacity. Christ sends the multitudes away, the masses, the mainstream people who are happy to come home and watch their Netflix and watch their movies and their sports and go to the bar and not pray and not fast and not meditate and not seek that narrow way where we awaken the power of Christ in our life. Those are the multitudes, and they are not bad people, but they are sent away as they are not ready yet. They are not quite in the space where they are ready to be a disciple. And a disciple is one who is opposite to the multitude. Those who are willing to embrace the life of prayer, inner work, inner awareness, meditation, fasting, and the wholehearted surrender to a life with Creator, with Christ. So Yeshua sends the masses, the multitudes away, and asks the disciples to get inside a ship. The ship is your spiritual vessel. It is the strength in that fallen world and pursuit of a higher world journey that you are embarking on. The lake represents human consciousness. So they are crossing human consciousness through their spiritual vessel, which is built in meditation. And now the unfavorable winds start to tear up this lake. The unfavorable winds are things like the mainstream media, the government, the education that you've had, the family conflicts, the survival needs, all of the stresses and strains of life that wish to stimulate your consciousness, your thoughts, and your emotional nature into chaos, into waves that are battering your ship, your spiritual vessel, which wishes to cross the consciousness of the fallen state. All of these different winds, they're constantly hitting our lives every day. The need to pay our bills, the threat of war, the fear, and all of those waves coming up are the emotional nature of man and the fear-based nature of man being generated from human thought or from human consciousness as thought and emotion by the stresses and strains of the fallen world. Then the disciples on the fourth watch, these things matter, see Christ on the water. The fourth watch is the fourfold nature of man: spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. The fourfold nature of who you are. And in the fourth watch, or the watching of the fourfold nature, you are becoming aware, as I often say, of your emotional responses, of your thoughts, of your physical impulses. You are becoming aware of the workings of the organism in which you, as a soul of loving awareness, fragmented loving awareness, are embodying. And as you become aware of that fourfold nature, as you become aware of your impulse towards temptations of the flesh, for example, or you are aware of the emotions that are unruly and unfavorable coming forward, or you are aware even of the thoughts and memories that are claiming ownership of the vessel and saying, I am an Englishman called John, etc. If you are aware that you are an Englishman called John, in the instance of this human organism and the awareness within it, clearly the one that is aware is the real truth of what you are, for how can it be aware of a name and a nationality if that is what it is? So in the fourth watch of the fourfold nature, mankind is watching his entire being internally. He's gone within. And as that happens, you see Christ on the water. The reason that we see Christ on the water is that inside human consciousness, with modern science, we are aware that there are 4 main brain frequency states: beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And I've said this many, many times. But the ancients didn't use that, nor did they have electronic apparatus to register this. They simply knew from internal awareness that there were these different functions and brainwave states, or states of consciousness. Beta, alpha, theta, delta becomes earth, water, air, fire. This is the codex. It is unchanged. If you look around in ancient Greece, where they were using this heavily, and you look at the story of the phoenix, what happens to the phoenix? It is playing in water ultimately, and then it rises to fire. Jesus is said that he will baptize you with fire after John has baptized you with water. Earth, water, air, fire. It is the movement from the carnality, the busyness of human thought, and the image of self based in there, into the space above and beyond human thought, where we meet Christ. And therefore, all of man must not reside permanently in beta. High beta is where you look for lies in a lie detector test. And so we must move from beta to alpha, earth to water, to know God. And when you sit on the higher levels of consciousness, you will walk on water. You will walk on water, and you will see Christ on water. That is where you will meet Christ. It's where you will hear God. It's where the living God will communicate with you, will connect with you. It is there, on that higher level of consciousness, above standard human thought, where the multitudes are largely living. The masses predominantly seek to entertain and externalize themselves, and you take away that electronic stimulus and distraction, and their brains are all over, they're running all over the place, because they're caught in beta, for they don't know Christ, for they haven't risen up to walk on the water. When the disciple starts to look back, he's looking back to the way of the multitudes. He's looking down, back. It's saying, if you turn back on your meditation, on your fasting, on your prayer, and you try to go back to that birth certificate toolbox that we've all been given, you will sink through the levels of consciousness away from the presence of Christ, who is there to hold you, to guide you, to nourish you, and back to the earth level, where you will separate from Creator again and become fodder for the fallen ones in their fallen energy extraction matrix. This is why you must walk on water. And I may have appeared slightly disingenuous here, as many are more interested in gifts of the Spirit, interested in the supernatural, rather than awakening. For they do not understand that inner peace, however boring it may sound to those that are programmed by the adrenaline that the multitudes are, awakens things and potentialities, expanded experiences within reality that are supernatural. But it requires inner peace. What use is it if I can walk across a lake today? How long before you get bored of that? Watching me do that. Wow, there's this one guy who can just literally walk on water, and they're studying it to find out why. Wouldn't you rather know how to cross the bridges of inner consciousness so that you can hear the voice of God? I know which I would rather have. It's not the all frills supernatural events. It is that, for there afterwards the supernatural is born. I have seen it. And ultimately, if you are on the fence about that notion, if you were to look at the work of someone like Dr. Joe Dispenza, what Dr. Joe Dispenza is teaching is exactly that. It is the baptism of fire. He is not, as I am aware of that this is what is being taught. Many still are programmed that the biblical texts are literal. But in reality, what he has taught thousands of people to do is to collapse the fallen world, the unfavorable program codes of sickness and suffering that we are struggling with. And in collapsing them, has brought in new codes that are favorable from the Christ dimension that is here to try and regain ground in this fallen world where unnecessary suffering is present. This was clearly represented by Yeshua, whose only response to sickness was to heal. Joe Dispenza's work has thousands of testimonials. It has scientific records and studies of what he's done. He is bringing people through a methodology to walk on water. And when they do, supernatural events such as healing and manifestations are occurring. Now, if you simply go to his YouTube and listen to the thousands of testimonials, your logic centers will tell you this is true. How can thousands and thousands of people be wrong? And therefore, this codex of walking on water in this instance is there for mankind to be set free from this restricted functionality like the cyborg, like the robot, and into all of its functions, which are, it would appear, as I have witnessed it, things such as healing. In my life, the predominant function that has animated me the last years is deliverance work, clearing these interdimensional species that are feeding on people. That ability is not done by the will of an image of self. It is done through the organism as an opening when there is no image. It is a space of absolute emptiness and at the same time absolute unity with all things. If you can perceive the whole of the universe from a zoomed out state without any thought, you would recognize this is one unified field of creation. It is said that God guides the humble. And what is humility? It is a human that is lovingly aware of its surroundings. That's it. It has no analysis, no want to control. It's just openly, lovingly aware. And in that space, any personal history fades away, and it is there that these supernatural program codes from the source code programmer arrive into the fallen world and heal people or chase away interdimensional species or allow you to see things or whatever it may be. In the life of this human also, the space of that profound inner stillness and emptiness is where the guidance came to go to a land I'd never been to, and now we have this fantastic family with hundreds of children. It is in the space of walking on water above human thought. And the problem we have is most religious scholars are never walking above human thought, so that they are attached to the historical image of these stories. And so when someone like myself, who is at the very best an amateur, a supremely amateur theologian, I can say, comes along with this information and instinctively, intuitively is aware that this is what was being communicated, that this is what the scriptures were trying to share, and has only arrived at that place after mimicking Yeshua, after fasting 40 days and 40 nights multiple times, etc. The consciousness shifted. People are not willing to hear it. But here and now, if you take any human being in this world and tell them Jesus walked on water, they may find some faith in that, may give them some strength that there actually is a God or whatever they draw from it. But if you take any human being and you follow what I've said, and you say to them, hey, we need to raise you up because this is a fact. The winds of life are going to tear up your consciousness and make you emotional. And your emotional nature is a weakened state for the species that we are. When that emotional nature is out of control, you'll make bad decisions, you'll hurt yourself, you'll sin, you'll pursue to find comfort in pleasures of the world. And therefore you must go inward. You must go inward, for if you roll with the physical body, you're not going to get anywhere. If you fight that nature with your physical, with your mind as the master, you will not get anywhere. But if we can bring you above the mind, above the earth level of consciousness, up to the water level, by watching your fourfold nature, by watching your five senses, by watching your intellect, by being aware of your emotions, being aware of your mind and of your body. If you are aware of all of its functionality, you will create distance between the impulses and their ability to animate your intelligence. And if you do that, the distance will grow and you will rise above and beyond the regular carnal state of human thought. And when you do, you will find this pool of immense stillness. And when you reach there, you will walk on water and you will meet Christ. This is universally true for every human. And this is the value that has been lost by taking scripture purely literal. And this is why it's time. It is time for the truth. Some of us are here for this. And it's a huge journey because you have millions or billions of firewalls that you need to somehow politely bring down and bring their awareness forward so they can return. And this does not harm the literal Yeshua. I take nothing away from him. I only add another layer of truth that tomorrow when you are stressed with your family, with your debts, with your illness, that you can become aware and say, this illness is a wind. This family feud is a wind stirring up my emotional nature and my thoughts. And those thoughts are waves that are battering my ship. And what I need to do is rise beyond those thoughts, rise beyond them. And how do I do it? I must become aware of all that I am, aware of my body and aware of my mind and my emotions. Just to be aware, not to try and stop them, just be aware of them coming and going, and there the distance appears. And there Christ will meet me and guide me out of my turmoil. We are at a time where humanity needs to have its intelligence animated by the Christ. And it is important that we find that place. It is important that mankind is ready for that transformation, even of its religious institutions. We have too many singing and worshipping and praising and then going back to the birth certificate identity and having that restricted 10 functions instead of the 100 functions that God wished for Christ to lead them into. If you don't believe me, believe Yeshua. These signs and wonders will follow those that believe. They will cast out demons, heal the sick, pray in a new tongue. Are those things following you? And if they are not, I urge you to follow his instruction and go within where you will find the kingdom. And follow the instruction of the writers of the scripture and walk on water. Wash your feet, for your feet touch the earth, and you need to raise from earth to water. Be baptized in the waters of the Baptist. Raise up from earth to water, beta to alpha, and then push on. Meet Jesus in the air, and then be baptized with fire. Be a phoenix that is playing in its pool of water, and then rises anew in the fire level of consciousness. This is where we are free. This is where God can speak with you. This is where the supernatural events of life will manifest through your life. I love you all. God bless, guys. Bye.
In 2015, John St. Julien opened the doors to Feather's Tale Children's Village to help alleviate the suffering of special needs children he witnessed in Tanzania. Feather's Tale successfully provides a safe and loving home to over 170 people, proving that every disabled child can have their quality of life drastically improved. John and his team are now expanding to new areas to help more children living in crisis with the help of our wonderful donors who make this work possible. The second children's village is now in the works and will become the blueprint to eliminating the suffering of every special needs child in Tanzania and beyond. The self-sustainable village will be home to over 300 children within the 4 children's homes. The therapy center will focus on providing the best care possible using physical and cognitive therapies. There will be separate houses for single parents with disabled children. The single mothers will have the opportunity to become caretakers of other children as they likely qualify highly for this work. We have a long way to go to complete the village, and we're working hard to gather the resources to move on to the next phase of the project. And if you feel called to help us build our second children's village, visit www.sharetanzania.com/invisible children and see how you can help partner with us on this project today.